Noam Chomsky weighed in on Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, and the state of politics today. Let's check it out.
How do you reflect now, a year in, on how he's going and where he's taking the country?
Actually, I think the best and most authoritative assessment was perhaps given by the famous doomsday clock. It began 7 minutes before midnight in 1947 after the atom bombing. It's been oscillating since. Just now, a week ago, it was moved forward to 2 minutes to midnight after a year of Trump. That's the closest it's been to terminal disaster since 1953, when the US and later the USSR exploded thermonuclear weapons, demonstrating that human intelligence had now developed the capacity to destroy everything on Earth. Now it's moved again to 2 minutes to midnight. The two major issues which they bring up, of course, are the growing threat of nuclear war and the increasing threat of global warming. Both of them extended, amplified by the actions of the Trump administration in the past year. These are the most serious issues that humans face, in fact, have ever faced in the history of the species. And they're both the world's major power, most powerful country in history, is now leading the way towards what may be terminal destruction.
How pessimistic then are you now that for whatever reasons the human race is on a path to self-destruction, or is there an element of optimism? Is there light there?
Yes, there are many quite hopeful signs. So again, take the United States, most important country in the world. Its actions influence the state of the world more than any other. And go back to the 2016 election. The focus of attention, of course, is on the Trump victory, but if you think about it, the electoral victory of a billionaire who had huge financial backing, spent close to $1 billion on the campaign, had enormous media support. The fact that he won the election is a little unusual because he wasn't the establishment candidate, but is pretty much within a normally expected range. However, something else happened, which was really astonishing. Bernie Sanders, who came from nowhere, even used the scare word socialist, had no support from private wealth or corporate power, had no media support. The media either ignored or denigrated him, would have won the Democratic Party nomination if it hadn't been for the machinations of party managers, might well have won the election, is now far and away the most respected political figure in the country.
I like how Noam Chomsky keeps giving us the hashtag Bernie would have won almost every time he makes a public appearance now. We covered this once before. He basically said the same thing previously. Bernie would have won is effectively what he's saying. And listen, he doesn't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly. We say that because it's true. And when you look at the evidence, it really is overwhelming. So Bernie Sanders went from being an obscure senator from Vermont. The only people who really knew about him were people like me who knew of Thom Hartman's show, and Bernie Sanders used to go on Thom Hartman's show every week and do a town hall where people would call in and ask him questions. But he was an obscure senator from Vermont, from a small state, and he went from having 0% support to, at the beginning of the election, the beginning of the primary season, to winning 46% of the vote and 22 states, with the entire media apparatus against him and the primary being rigged against him, as has been proven in various WikiLeaks, among other things. So look at that accomplishment. You're, somebody who's about 1,006 years old. You have bad posture. You don't comb your hair. You have a funny accent when you talk. You're somebody who's Jewish who maybe is atheist, and even you describe yourself as a democratic socialist, which many people took and spun and just called you a socialist. So you have all these things which should have been strikes against you, like, oh shit, he can't win because of this and this and this and this and this. And he went from 0% support to winning 46% of the vote with the entire system biased against him. That's impressive. So what Noam Chomsky is saying here is that movement, the movement that got behind Bernie Sanders, that's the movement for the future. Because what you have there is just an army of mostly young people who are really passionate about the issues and making the world a better place. So, in other words, these are all young people whose heart is in the right place, and the policies they're fighting for are the policies that America needs and that would move us towards the future in a way that's sustainable and reasonable. You have young people fighting for a living wage and young people fighting for Medicare for all and free college and a New Deal and ending the wars and legalizing marijuana and, saving us from climate change. And that's what's giving Noam Chomsky hope. Now, the things that he said are terrifying, indeed are terrifying. So he speaks about how the doomsday clock is 2 minutes to midnight, which is like, holy shit. We don't really stop to take a minute to digest that fact. I feel like we all just kind of go about our day thinking about what we have to do, and it's like, okay, here's my schedule, and we rarely stop and reflect on what's actually going on around us. And the fact of the matter is, guys, Donald Trump is president. If you heard me say that sentence in 2015, 2014, 2013, you would have laughed. You would have laughed. You would have been like, no, that's just not true. That's not true. Kyle from the future could have went back there and said, Donald Trump is president. And you would say, that's ha 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 ha. But that's what it is. You have a reality star buffoon, a thin-skinned madman who's genuinely unintelligent, who is the most powerful man on the planet, who has an army. He has his own army. He's the commander-in-chief. He's bombing 8 different countries right now. But what Noam Chomsky is saying is, no, it's worse than that. So the policies on climate change, that's like, almost saying game, set, match on humanity. That might sound hyperbolic, but is it really? Every single policy of this government now acts as if climate change isn't real and it's irrelevant and we don't care about the environment at all. Meanwhile, Cape Town, South Africa is running out of water. We have reports about how the Middle East will be uninhabitable by the year 2100 because it'll be too hot for humans to exist there. We're going to have wars over water. We're going to have famine. We're going to have drought. We already have an increase in natural disasters across the board, both extremes. So, look at what we're dealing with here. The world is falling apart around us, and these guys are saying, fuck yeah, baby, let me get another hit. These guys are like, what is this? Is this the destruction of the world? Yeah, baby, give me more of that. They're snorting the destruction of the world as we speak. Scott Pruitt said, we partner with the energy industry. What? You're the head of the EPA, bitch. He's like, no, you work with them. That's like the cop saying, we work with the robbers. Why would you work with the robbers? You're supposed to be the police officer. They're the robber. Arrest them. He's like, do you work with them? What the fuck is that? What are you doing? They banned scientists from the advisory boards. What? If you are a scientist and you have ever gotten a government grant for any reason, they go, you're not allowed to help the EPA make decisions. Those would be the first people I would go to help the EPA make decisions. They go, no, that shows a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest? Their grants are worth like 50 grand. They're barely getting by. All they care about is their research. You're saying, no, big government grants have made it so big science is a corrupted industry. No, what's a corrupted industry is the oil industry and the energy industry, the people who are doing fracking. They have a vested interest in making sure we never get off of dirty energy sources. But that's who you're working with in the EPA. They cut the renewable energy programs by 72%, Trump did. So we're going down the path of climate change at 1,000 miles an hour, and then the even scarier part, nuclear war. We all walk around as if everything's permanent. It's not permanent. Imagine existing during World War I there's an assassination of a random Archduke, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and next thing you know, millions of people are dead. And afterwards, you're all sitting there like in, whatever, what's the movie, Anchorman? He's like, that escalated quickly. A random Archduke was assassinated, millions of people dead, because we had a world war. If a world war can break out over the assassination of a random Archduke, you don't think world war can break out as the result of, I don't know, say the United States and North Korea actually, finally, coming to a hot war? And you think that's not possible? We have Donald Trump basically every other week prodding a thin-skinned child dictator with a stick, saying, only one thing will work. Only one thing will work. We tried to do everything else. Only one thing will work. They're talking about regime change, man. And if you do go to war with North Korea, millions of people dead. On the North Korean side, people die. South Korea, Seoul will be wiped out. I mean, what we're doing here, we're playing a dangerous game. This is real life we're talking about here. So you could have a hot war over North Korea. You know they're pushing for war with Iran. They've wanted regime change ever since our guy, the Shah, was toppled. So ever since the 1979 revolution, the U.S. has said we want to topple their government again. Because remember, we toppled the Iranian government in 1953 and put in a dictator that serves us, for oil reasons, by the way, us and Britain. So we've wanted to topple that government ever since. We already did it in Iraq. So we're right on the brink of war with North Korea. We're right on the brink of war with Iran. And listen, we're on the brink of war with Russia, too. People act like, no, Trump is Putin's puppet. Well, sure ain't acting like it by having NATO troops built up right on Russia's border, which is a clear escalation. We're arming Ukrainian rebels, which is a clear escalation because they're fighting Russia over the Crimea situation. We're slapping sanctions on them every other week. We just almost had two planes, a U.S. plane and a Russian plane, go down in the Black Sea. Let me ask you a question. What happens if that happens? Shit, a U.S. plane and a Russian plane just went down over the Black Sea. What happens? What happens in that situation? Potential war. So, this is what Noam Chomsky's saying. Be afraid, man. Be afraid. We're this close. That's why the doomsday clock is 2 seconds to midnight. Because this is the stage we're at. People have a weird sense of security sometimes when something hasn't happened for a while. So there was World War I, horrendous. Then there was World War II, horrendous. It's been a while since there was a world war. So people get a false sense of security. It can't happen again. After World War I, they said it would never happen again. And then World War II happened almost immediately after. So it ain't stable. It ain't stable. Don't take civilization around you for granted. That's the point.